Greetings and welcome to a story that will change everything you thought you knew about the air war over Europe. Today we delve into a radical transformation of the legendary P-47 Thunderbolt, a fighter that was once considered slow and lumbering, now suddenly capable of feats that seemed impossible just weeks ago. Imagine 8 American Thunderbolts flying at 23,000 feet over northern France, their contrails slicing through the winter sky like fingers reaching for the enemy. But what happens when the leader of this formation performs a move so unexpected, so shocking, that it rewires the very perception of aerial combat? Could a beast weighing over 7 tons climb at angles that defied physics? Did a deep, menacing roar from twin engines signal a new, more aggressive phase in the war? And how did a simple solution, a mixture of water and methanol, turn these fighters into unstoppable climbing monsters overnight? What if the Germans, who had long exploited the P-47's sluggishness with ruthless agility, suddenly found themselves unable to escape or outrun? Was the invincible behemoth of the skies beginning to evolve into something faster, more deadly, and far more unpredictable? Could a secret upgrade, an injection system that cooled and supercharged the engine, really have unlocked a new level of performance? And what does this mean for the fate of the air war in those tense, frozen days of February 1944? In this video, we will follow the trail from the first signs of this transformation, through the engineering breakthroughs at Republic Aviation, to the pilots who suddenly faced a different kind of enemy, an aircraft that seemed to defy its own nature. We will uncover how the seemingly impossible became reality, and what this meant for the Germans fighting in the skies. Get ready, because what you are about to hear might just rewrite the history of aerial combat forever. The most astonishing chapter begins now. In the cold gray skies over northern France, on the 15th day of February in the year 1944, precisely at the hour of 1 in the afternoon, Major Marseille and his fellow pilot, Hans Wim Oberleutnant, observed an unmistakable phenomenon unfolding before their eyes. From the west, at an altitude of 23,000 feet, 8 formidable Republic P-47 Thunderbolts advanced in tight formation. Their contrails cut stark white streaks across the winter sky, resembling fingers stretching eagerly into the misty atmosphere, reaching out toward Marseille's own Messerschmitt Bf-109 G6 fighter. Suddenly, and with a jarring abruptness, the lead American fighter performed an action that chilled Marseille to his core. It was a move so unexpected, so contrary to everything he believed about these heavy, rugged fighters, that it irrevocably altered his perception of the air war. The American pilot's maneuver was so startling that it marked what might be called a turning point, the moment when the Luftwaffe's seasoned combat veteran realized that the seemingly insurmountable advantage they had enjoyed was slipping away, vanishing into the frosty morning air. The Thunderbolt, a beast of an aircraft weighing over 7 tons, was now climbing at an angle that, to Marseille's eyes, seemed physically impossible. Its twin Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines roared with an intensity that had never before been audible to him, unleashing a sound that seemed to echo the very pulse of raw, unrestrained power. That deep, resonant growl, combined with thin wisps of what looked like steam trailing from the exhaust stacks, betrayed a new, unanticipated strength in these fighters. An evolution that made the Luftwaffe's pilots realize that their familiar tactics might no longer suffice. Up until this point, the German fighters, including the Chasseurs of the 2nd Squadron led by Fahl, had routinely engaged the Americans in combat that exploited the P-47's known limitations. Since the introduction of this massive fighter by the Allies the previous spring, the Germans had come to see it as a lumbering but formidable escort, often predictable in its climbing and diving patterns. The standard German tactic, developed and perfected over months, was to exploit the P-47's sluggish climb, executing swift, sharp bounce passes from above that took advantage of the American pilots' difficulty in matching the superior climb rate of the German fighters. When the Germans initiated these attacks, the American heavy fighters, clumsy and slow in their ascent, would often stall or fall behind, forcing the pilots to break off and retreat. But in that moment over northern France, Major Fahl watched, stunned, as the lead Thunderbolt, marked unmistakably with the distinctive checkerboard nose insignia of the 81st Fighter Group, maintained its climb with an ease that defied previous expectations. It kept pace with the Messers, matching their angles meter for meter. The engine's roar had changed. It sounded deeper, more violent, and wisps of vapor, perhaps steam, trailed from the exhaust stacks, hinting at a transformation in the firepower and performance of this once-predicted dive bomber. Fal, a seasoned veteran of air combat since the earliest days of the Battle of Britain, had faced countless adversaries: British Spitfires and Hurricanes, Soviet Yaks and Lag-3s, American P-38 Lightnings, and P-51 Mustangs. He knew the P-47 well. It had been a predictable, if formidable, adversary. Its strength lay in its ruggedness, its ability to dive and absorb damage like a falling safe, but it was notoriously sluggish when climbing, like a pregnant whale laboring skyward. German pilots over the months had learned to exploit this weakness with ruthless efficiency, using their superior climb angles and agility to bounce the Americans from above, execute swift firing passes, and then zoom away to safety before the Thunderbolts could respond. This tactic had served the Germans well, allowing them to control the skies over Europe for nearly a year. But now, as Fal watched his wingman pull into the standard escape climb, painfully aware that a P-47 was now latched onto his tail, matching his climb angle shot for shot, he began to grasp that everything had changed overnight. The seemingly invincible, sluggish behemoth that had once been a nightmare to German pilots was now transformed into something altogether different, something faster, more aggressive, and far more dangerous. Although the transformation of the P-47 Thunderbolt had not occurred in a single night, such a radical change was unlikely. It was undeniably evident to Fal and his comrades that they faced a radically altered adversary. The American fighters, once predictable and limited in their climbing capabilities, had evidently undergone a significant evolution, rendering their former tactics obsolete and forcing the Germans to reconsider their entire approach to fighting these now redefined monsters of the skies. In the midst of the intense and relentless efforts by engineers at Republic Aviation and Pratt & Whitney, a significant breakthrough was achieved to address the well-known climb limitations of the fighter aircraft. These experts worked tirelessly to develop and implement an innovative solution: a water-methanol injection system, commonly referred to as ADI, which stood for anti-detonation injection. This system was designed to spray a carefully calibrated mixture of water and methanol in equal parts directly into the supercharger. Its primary purpose was to cool the highly compressed air charge before it entered the engine, thus significantly reducing the risk of detonation, a persistent problem during high-performance climbs. The special mixture was introduced at a rate of approximately 6 gallons directly into the intake of the General Electric C-23 turbo supercharger, a vital component of the engine's forced induction system. As the water evaporated, it absorbed a substantial amount of heat, effectively cooling the compressed air and preventing premature ignition. Simultaneously, the methanol, with its high octane rating of 110, served as an anti-detonant agent, allowing the engine to operate at higher manifold pressures without risking catastrophic damage. Thanks to this sophisticated injection system, the R2859 engine saw its power output surge from the standard 2,000 horsepower to an impressive 2,800 horsepower, an increase of approximately 40%. This remarkable boost in power dramatically expanded the aircraft's performance envelope, transforming its climbing capabilities and overall agility. The upgrade was complemented by the installation of new Hamilton standard hydraulic paddle blade propellers, featuring blades of broad, 13-inch diameter that gripped the air with unprecedented efficiency. These advanced propellers replaced the older, toothpick-like models, which had previously hampered the Thunderbolt's ability to perform steep climbs quickly and effectively. The first unit to receive these modifications was the 56th Fighter Group stationed at Bokstad, with the installation taking place in January of 1944. Notably, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabreski, a prominent and skilled fighter pilot, documented in his combat reports that German pilots who had previously relied on climbing to escape now found themselves unexpectedly pursued into their own climbs by the upgraded P-47 Thunderbolts. The new system enabled these fighters to maintain pursuit angles that would have been considered impossible mere weeks earlier. Under emergency power conditions that lasted for approximately 5 minutes, the water injection system converted the once sluggish aircraft into a veritable climbing monster, capable of extraordinary maneuvers and rapid ascents. News of these remarkable improvements traveled swiftly through the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. Initially, many German pilots refused to believe the reports, considering them either the result of pilot error or exaggerated claims. However, skepticism quickly gave way to awe and disbelief when they personally encountered the enhanced American fighters in combat. One such encounter involved Feldwebel Kurt Bulligan of WWII, who had previously scored victories by attacking from above, making high-speed firing passes and then zooming upward to escape. On February 14th of the year 1944, just a day before his engagement near Marseille, Bulligan had engaged a formation of Thunderbolts near Camry. He attacked the trailing American fighter, scored hits on its engine cowling, and then pulled into his typical escape climb. To his astonishment, the damaged Thunderbolt began to follow him upward, its pilot activating the last eighth of throttle travel, which triggered the water injection system. The engine's roar changed from its usual thunderous noise to an almost supernatural, roaring crescendo. Bulligan watched as his airspeed indicator dropped while the massive American fighter inexplicably maintained its climbing trajectory. The Thunderbolt's enhanced performance forced him to level off and attempt an escape in a dive. But the aircraft's weight advantage made this maneuver even more perilous. The German engineers' curiosity about this transformation would have been piqued had they known the full technical details. The ADI system injected the water-methanol mixture directly into the eye of the turbo supercharger, where it atomized and evaporated, absorbing heat and cooling the intake charge by approximately 25 degrees Celsius. This process allowed the engine to sustain higher manifold pressures, thereby producing significantly more power and improving overall climb performance. Moreover, the system's ability to deliver 5 minutes of emergency power turned the Thunderbolt from a reliable fighter into a veritable climbing monster, a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. On a chilly day when the temperature was just 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the innovative modifications made to the P-47 Thunderbolt became vividly apparent. The key enhancement involved the use of methanol as a fuel additive, capitalizing on its notably low boiling point of approximately 148.5 degrees Fahrenheit. This characteristic meant that, upon injection into the engine's supercharger, methanol vaporized almost instantaneously. This rapid vaporization served a dual purpose. It provided an immediate cooling effect on the charged air, thereby enhancing engine efficiency, and it added an extra source of energy to the fuel mixture, boosting overall power output. As a result, the upgraded Thunderbolt was capable of running at an increased manifold pressure, around 70 inches of mercury, compared to the standard 52 inches. This significant boost in pressure translated into markedly improved high-altitude performance in raw power, making the aircraft more formidable than ever before. In November of '43, German military intelligence managed to capture a damaged P-47 Thunderbolt, designated P-475, at a Luftwaffe airfield. This aircraft was part of the American forces, and its capture was prompted after Second Lieutenant William E. Roach from the 355th Fighter Group executed an emergency landing, bringing the aircraft down safely in enemy territory. Crucially, this particular P-47 had not yet undergone the water injection modifications, meaning that German engineers could study it without the complications introduced by the new system. Unfortunately for the Germans, even if they had been aware of these modifications earlier, their own aviation industry was already under tremendous strain. The relentless onslaught of Allied bombing had severely hampered their ability to produce new aircraft designs, let alone develop and incorporate advanced features such as water-methanol injection systems into existing fighter aircraft. Consequently, German pilots faced the transformed American Thunderbolts in combat with aircraft that, suddenly, seemed out of date and increasingly vulnerable, as the Allies' upgraded fighters demonstrated superior high-altitude maneuverability and raw power. Meanwhile, the Italian Social Republic's Air Force, known as the Aeronautica Nazionale Repubblicana, first encountered the upgraded Thunderbolts on March the 11th of the year 1944. Major Adriano Visconti led a squadron of Italian fighters, specifically the Fiat G-55, which was powered by license-built Daimler-Benz DB605 engines, into combat against a mixed formation of American bombers and escort fighters. The Italians were confident in their aircraft's agility. Their fighters had, in earlier encounters, proved capable of turning inside American fighters and had demonstrated effectiveness against older versions of the P-47 Thunderbolt. These fighters had earned a reputation for their nimbleness and reliability, which gave their pilots hope against what seemed to be the dominant American fighters. However, during this particular engagement, Major Visconti's confidence was abruptly shaken. He watched in astonishment as a Thunderbolt, one he had anticipated would fall behind him in a climb, remained stubbornly close. The American pilot was fueling his aircraft's engine with a push into war emergency power, which involved spraying a water-methanol mixture into the supercharger. This allowed the engine to produce unprecedented power, as the supercharger's paddle blades struggled to keep pace with the increased airflow and combustion efficiency. The American aircraft responded with remarkable agility, forcing Visconti to abandon his attack and to plunge downwards in a desperate bid to escape. The upgraded P-47, with its water injection system activated, demonstrated an extraordinary climb rate, leaving Italian fighters struggling to keep up. Later, on March the 18th of 1944, Italian ace Major Luigi Guerini, flying with the first group of Okaccia, would face similar challenges in combat against the same type of heavily modified Thunderbolt. Previously, Guerini had scored 3 victories in 1943, leveraging his aircraft's superior climb rate and maneuverability to outperform heavier American fighters. Yet during this encounter, the game had changed. The American pilot activated the water injection system as Guerini attempted to escape in a climbing spiral. The engine roared with newfound power, maintaining the climb with relentless ferocity. Guerini's Macchi C-205 struggled to hold its airspeed amid the increasing power output, forcing him to execute an inverted roll and dive away to avoid being overtaken. Using his aircraft's superior roll rate, Guerini managed to escape, later reporting to his squadron commander that the Americans had somehow transformed their heavy fighters into aircraft that seemed completely different from what they had been just months earlier. The new modifications had rendered the P-47 a more formidable adversary than Italy's pilots had ever encountered before. The Japanese Army Air Force operating in the Pacific Theater would not confront the fully upgraded Thunderbolt until later in the year 1944. When they finally did, the impact was no less profound. Major Terahiko Kobayashi of the 244th Sentai, flying a Nakajima K-8, regarded as Japan's most capable fighter of the war. In the midst of aerial combat, a pilot aimed to seize a strategic advantage over his adversary, only to be stunned as a seemingly subdued Thunderbolt, which he had believed was operating in a low-energy, almost exhausted state, suddenly erupted with an extraordinary surge of power that defied all expectations. This unexpected display of raw force was nothing short of astonishing, catching the pilot off guard as the formidable aircraft rapidly ascended with a velocity that should have been impossible given its earlier apparent sluggishness. The pilot had engaged water injection, a system designed to temporarily boost engine performance, hoping to gain an edge. Yet even without this aid, the sheer power of the American fighter had been impressive. The pilot's disbelief deepened as he watched the massive aircraft climb at an angle so steep that it should have instantly caused it to stall or lose momentum. Yet it continued ascent with unwavering strength. The impressive feat was partly attributable to the paddle blade propellers, massive, broad blades with a diameter of about 13 feet, which had shown significant performance enhancements during early testing phases. Back in December of 1943, Lowry Brabham, a test pilot working with the Republic Company, was among those who first experienced the remarkable improvements these hydroatic propellers could deliver during initial flights with the Hamilton Standard model. These blades dramatically increased thrust across various altitudes, especially during climbs, where older propeller designs, like the Curtiss electric type, had historically proved inefficient. Thanks to the installation of these broader blades, the climb rate of the Thunderbolts increased by roughly 400 feet per minute, even without the aid of water injection. However, when the airplane was equipped with the automatic differential inject system, commonly known as ADI, these advantages were exponentially amplified. The combination of the advanced propeller design and the ADI system effectively transformed the aircraft, making it feel as if a completely new fighter had been created, despite its familiar Thunderbolt silhouette. The aircraft's performance soared far beyond prior expectations, turning what was traditionally a heavy, rugged fighter into an agile, highly formidable machine capable of matching the climb performance of much lighter and more nimble fighters. One notable account of this transformation involved Hauptmann Heinzbar, a highly skilled ace from the Jägerschwader 1 Squadron, which was part of the Luftwaffe fighter wing. Heinzbar, renowned for his impressive tally of more than 200 aerial victories, encountered the upgraded Thunderbolts on the 23rd of February, 1944. During a perilous bomber interception mission near Frankfurt, Heinzbar and his squadron engaged a group of Faule Wolf FW 1988 fighters, with the American P-47s from the 4th Fighter Group diving aggressively into the fray following a classic American attack formation. Initially, the battle seemed to follow the familiar script, as Heinzbar ordered his fighters to break into climbing spirals, a maneuver traditionally used to evade pursuing enemy fighters. The American aircraft exhibited a startling ability to follow their ascent. This response was shocking because just a few weeks earlier, such aggressive climbing by the P-47s would have been impossible for aircraft at that stage of their development. The American fighters not only kept pace but maintained pursuit angles that had previously been considered unattainable with their weight and design limitations. Heinzbar was taken aback, recognizing that the performance enhancement had fundamentally changed how these fighters could operate in combat scenarios. Faced with this newfound agility, Heinzbar was forced to make the difficult decision to send his pilots into separate splits in individual escape maneuvers, hoping to evade their persistent pursuers. Later, in his combat report, he would describe the awe-inspiring capabilities of these aircraft, noting that the Americans had somehow endowed their heavily armed fighters with the climb performance typically associated with lighter, more nimble aircraft like the Messerschmitts. This marked a significant turning point in aerial combat, illustrating how technological advancements could shift the balance of power in the skies. Despite these notable improvements, the rollout of the water injection system was not without its early difficulties. The first units to receive the water injection feature in the European theater encountered numerous operational failures, primarily due to ground crews mistakenly filling the automatic differential injection tanks with the wrong mixture. Instead of the correct 50% methanol, they often used a 30% ethanol mixture because of supply confusion, which proved disastrous. The improper mixture caused engines to detonate prematurely and fail during combat engagements, severely undermining the perceived reliability of the system. In response to these issues, Pratt & Whitney dispatched their engineer, Bill Kloss, to England in February of 1944 to diagnose and resolve the problems. Kloss soon discovered that many crew chiefs and ground personnel lacked a clear understanding of the critical importance of the mixture ratio. The methanol wasn't merely an antifreeze additive, but was a vital component of the engine's fuel system. It provided essential cooling properties as well as anti-detonation functions, while also adding energy to the combustion process. When used correctly, this mixture greatly enhanced engine performance, was transformed as the formidable American fighter suddenly became a different beast altogether. What had been an ordinary engagement quickly escalated into a tense and dangerous pursuit that would underline the evolving capabilities of the P-47 Thunderbolt during the air war over Europe. This particular encounter occurred on the 3rd of March in the year 1444, when Major Gunther R. of Jägerschwader 11 found himself facing what would be a memorable and defining moment in his combat career. It was a time when the Luftwaffe's seasoned aces began to realize that their once dominant aircraft were now being challenged by new American innovations, capable of matching and even surpassing their own aerial prowess. On that day, Major R was engaged in an attack against a formidable formation of B-17 flying fortresses near Berlin, aiming to take advantage of what had often been a successful tactic: diving through enemy formations in an attempt to inflict damage and then escaping into the skies. Expecting to disappear into the protective cover of the bomber escort, fighters by climbing away on the far side of the formation, he launched his attack with confidence. Yet what followed was far from routine. As he pulled his aircraft upward after the attack run, a relentless pursuer, An American P-47 with the distinctive markings of the 359th Fighter Group remained on his tail, refusing to relinquish the chase. This pursuing fighter, powered by an engine enhanced with water-methanol injection, an advanced technology that significantly boosted power, forced Major R into a frantic series of evasive maneuvers. The water injection system, a device tested earlier by the Germans on their BMW 801 radial engines and known as MW50, had shown promise but was hampered in deployment by production difficulties and the complexity of integration. Despite these hurdles, the Americans had managed to implement this technology across their entire P-47 fleet within just a few months, retrofitting older aircraft in the field and equipping new fighters directly from the assembly lines. This rapid and large-scale adoption highlighted the extraordinary industrial capacity of the United States, a capacity that even a struggling German war economy could not match, despite their knowledge of the technology. In this critical engagement, Major R's aircraft was pushed to its limits, with the engine screaming at a staggering 2,800 horsepower, thanks to the water-methanol cooling system that kept the engine's charge air at optimal temperatures. The American pilot, pushing his throttle into what was known as war emergency power, was relentless. He continued to follow R through the skies, forcing the German pilot into a series of violent and desperate maneuvers to shake his pursuer. The use of every combat trick learned over 4 years of aerial warfare was necessary as the seemingly unbeatable Thunderbolt pursued him with unyielding determination. The psychological impact of such encounters on the Luftwaffe's pilots was profound. Prior to these developments, the P-47 Thunderbolt had been considered a relatively easy aircraft to confront and evade. Its opponents believed they held the upper hand in both speed and maneuverability. But now, with the American fighters capable of matching them in climb rate, outdiving them dramatically, and absorbing enormous amounts of damage while still delivering devastating firepower, that illusion of superiority was shattered. The Thunderbolt's formidable armament, consisting of 8 powerful, 50-caliber machine guns, combined with its robust construction, meant that it could sustain significant damage and still continue fighting effectively. This transformation in aerial tactics and aircraft performance coincided with the arrival of more experienced American pilots, many of whom had learned to exploit the full potential of their aircraft. These pilots capitalized on the strengths of the P-47, creating a situation where the Germans found themselves increasingly outmatched. Their once dominant tactics and aircraft designs were no longer sufficient, as the Americans adapted and refined their approach, turning the tide of air superiority over the European theater. Meanwhile, another notable figure, Hermann Graf of Jagdgeschwader 52, arrived in France from the Eastern Front in February of the year 1444. Graf, who had accumulated over 200 aerial victories against Soviet aircraft, anticipated that the Western Front would offer similar success against the upgraded American fighters. However, his expectations were soon challenged. On the 28th of February, he engaged what he suspected was a lone P-47 straggling behind the main formation, intending to execute a bounce, a tactic where a fighter ambushes an enemy aircraft unexpectedly. But what seemed like a simple attack quickly turned perilous. Just as Graf thought he had the advantage, the American pilot surged his engine into water injection mode, a maneuver that dramatically increased the aircraft's power output. The engine's roar intensified, the aircraft's performance leaping to new heights, transforming what had been an opportunistic attack into a fight for survival. The water-injected engine, which had been tested by the Germans but not widely adopted due to its complexity, proved its worth in this moment. It allowed the American fighter to accelerate past the German pilot's expectations, making the fight highly dangerous. During a fierce aerial confrontation, a formidable aircraft suddenly surged upwards with startling speed, almost as if it had been unleashed by some extraordinary force. It was a moment that left onlookers, even seasoned veterans, in awe. A veteran pilot who had witnessed countless dogfights involving fighters from Germany, the Soviet Union, Britain, and the United States, later confessed that he had never seen any aircraft, no matter its origin, execute a climb with such ferocity and explosive power. The enemy's ascent seemed almost violent, defying expectations of conventional aircraft performance. From a different theater of combat, The Japanese perspective echoed similar astonishment. Lieutenant Colonel Kojiro Takahashi, a seasoned pilot of the 50th Senti, was flying a Nakajima K-44 Shoki interceptor, an aircraft specifically designed for exceptional climb performance. It was May of 1944, and he found himself engaged in a tense aerial duel over Burma against formidable P-47 D-25 Thunderbolts. Takahashi, confident in his aircraft's lighter weight and superior climb capabilities, believed he could outpace and outclimb the much larger American fighter. However, his confidence was soon shattered as he looked on in disbelief. In a stunning display of raw power, one of the Thunderbolts, which Takahashi thought was confined to low altitude and thus limited in its vertical agility, suddenly shot upward with unprecedented force. The pilot of the American fighter had activated water injection, an advanced engine performance technique, and responded with a surge that transformed the aircraft's climb rate into something almost mythical. Despite Takahashi's K-44 possessing an excellent climb rate, it could not keep pace with the Thunderbolt's extraordinary ascent, forcing the Japanese pilot to break off the pursuit and report back to his headquarters. The startling realization was that American engineers, through innovative modifications, had seemingly turned their heavy fighters into aircraft that appeared to defy the laws of physics, a feat that seemed almost supernatural. This technical revolution was not limited merely to engine enhancements. Engineers at Republic, the company responsible for producing the P-47 Thunderbolt, had implemented a series of structural and mechanical upgrades to handle the increased power output of around 2,800 horsepower. They reinforced critical structural components, such as the engine mountings, upgraded the oil cooling systems to cope with the additional heat generated under wartime emergency power settings, and modified the propeller governor to handle the immense loads imposed by the large paddle-bladed propellers. All these changes worked in concert, creating an integrated system that expanded the aircraft's performance envelope significantly. Remarkably, these improvements preserved the Thunderbolt's legendary durability. The aircraft's ability to absorb enormous amounts of battle damage while still bringing its pilots safely home remained intact, even as it gained these extraordinary new capabilities. Meanwhile, in Italy, Capitano Franco Bordoni, a distinguished pilot of the Aeronautica Nazionale Repubblicana's 2nd Fighter Group, was flying a Fiat G55 Centauro, often regarded as Italy's finest fighter aircraft of the war. On the 2nd of April in 1944, near the city of Turin, Bordoni engaged in combat against American P-47D Thunderbolts. Leading a formation of 4 Italian fighters, he was on a mission to attack American fighter bombers that had been damaging vital rail yards, a strategic target. Expecting that the Centauro's agility and performance would give his formation an advantage, he dove into the fight with confidence. However, the reality proved much more astonishing. As Bordoni and his comrades closed in, the American fighters suddenly broke into a sharp climb. One pilot, who later became legendary for his daring, activated water injection, injecting a mixture of water and methanol into his engine. This action allowed the P-47 to suddenly propel itself upward at an angle that seemed impossible given its great weight and size. To Bordoni, it appeared as if the Thunderbolt had gained a supernatural boost, soaring upward in a manner that defied conventional aerodynamics and physics. The sheer power of that acceleration caused Bordoni's Italian formation to scatter, each plane desperately trying to escape individually from the mounting threat. The use of water-methanol mixture in wartime engines was a precise engineering art form. Typically, pilots and engineers used a 50-50 ratio of water to methanol, although some units experimented with a 60-40 mix favoring methanol. The water component played a critical role by providing the primary cooling effect due to its high latent heat of vaporization, absorbing around 900 to 1,000 BTUs per pound, a stark contrast to gasoline's mere 150 BTUs. When injected into the engine's intake, the water vaporized immediately, absorbing a tremendous amount of heat and thereby cooling the combustion process. Simultaneously, the methanol vaporized at lower temperatures, providing additional charge cooling and allowing the engine to safely operate at higher power settings without risking damage. This sophisticated combination of engine modifications and fuel mixture adjustments enabled the American fighters to achieve performance levels that seemed almost superhuman. The phenomenon, The development of high-octane combustion fuel brought about a significant leap in the performance capabilities of the P-47 Thunderbolt, primarily due to its ability to operate at much higher power levels than traditional fuels would permit. This advanced fuel, characterized by its exceptional octane rating, enabled the R2800 engine to unleash increased power without the risk of premature detonation, a common problem when using conventional fuels. As a result, the aircraft could push beyond previous performance boundaries, transforming its operational potential in combat situations. Major Wilhelm Hoffmann of the JG-3 unit, stationed at Salsette, had mastered a set of tactical techniques specifically designed to exploit the Thunderbolt's vulnerabilities. His approach was meticulous, instructing his pilots to always attack from an advantageous altitude, preferably from above, execute a swift, decisive firing pass, and then quickly retreat by climbing steeply. This tactic was based on the belief that the heavy American fighters could not effectively match such sudden and steep climbs, giving Japanese pilots a tactical edge. However, on the 8th of March in the year 1944, Hoffmann found his carefully devised plan falling apart during a critical interception mission involving B-24 Liberators, escorted by P-47s from the 355th Fighter Group. His moment of confidence turned into surprise when the Thunderbolts, instead of adhering to their expected performance, suddenly exhibited a level of climb capability that rivaled or even surpassed that of his own aircraft. As his pilots radioed distress signals, reporting an alarm about the unexpected agility of these American fighters, Hoffmann observed an unsettling sight. The P-47s, which ought to have been lagging behind, maintained pursuit and even closed the gap. This dramatic shift in the tactical scenario was driven by the P-47's upgraded water injection system, which roared to life as the engines, large Pratt & Whitney radial units, delivered power levels previously thought unattainable. This system injected water directly into the engine's combustion chambers, effectively cooling the mixture and allowing the engine to generate more power safely. The resulting increase in thrust transformed aerial combat, turning what had been a sluggish, heavily armed ground attack aircraft into a formidable fighter capable of high-speed pursuits and rapid climbs. The roots of these performance enhancements trace back to the early engineering efforts that aimed to improve the Thunderbolt's climb rate. Before the water injection system was implemented, Hamilton's standard engineers had recognized that the existing Curtiss electric propellers, originally optimized for high-speed cruising, were inadequate for the high torque, low-speed performance necessary for effective climbing and dogfighting. They identified the need for a new propeller design, the hydrostatic paddle blade, which featured a broader chord and a modified blade angle. These blades were carefully balanced and matched to reduce vibration and increase efficiency across a broad range of speeds and altitudes. The introduction of these paddle blades alone added approximately 400 feet per minute to the aircraft's climb rate, even before the water injection system was engaged. When combined, these improvements allowed the P-47 to reach higher altitudes more swiftly, giving pilots a crucial advantage in intercepting enemy aircraft. The enhanced climb performance directly translated into better defensive and offensive capabilities in the skies. Meanwhile, on the other side of the conflict, Lieutenant Yoshio Yoshida of the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force's 64th Senti was flying a Kawasaki K-61 Hen, powered by a liquid-cooled engine akin to the German DB601. In January of 1945, Yoshida encountered the upgraded P-47s over Formosa, where he faced a new version of the Thunderbolt that embodied the latest technological advancements. This aircraft had a longer wingspan, increased fuel capacity, and incorporated the full water injection system, producing an astonishing 2,800 horsepower, a significant boost from earlier variants. Yoshida later recounted in his diary how what he had been led to believe was a sluggish American fighter suddenly displayed performance levels that defied his expectations, exceeding anything else in Japanese inventory. Climbing with remarkable authority and maintaining a speed that his K-61 could not match, the upgraded P-47 appeared almost superhuman in its agility. Recognizing that escape was impossible and dangerously outmatched, Yoshida dove into cloud cover to evade the pursuing aircraft. He later reflected that the Americans had effectively created a monster, a machine that seemed to violate the fundamental laws of aviation physics by combining incredible climb, speed, and agility. The implications of these technological improvements extended far beyond isolated dogfights. With the enhanced Thunderbolts now capable of providing reliable escort for bombers over long distances, their operational range was significantly extended. They could accompany bombing missions all the way to Berlin and return safely, intercepting high-altitude German fighters, such as the Focke-Wulf FW-190 and Messerschmitt Bf-109, that had been able to operate with impunity at altitudes above 30,000 feet. The water injection system consistently maintained high power outputs even at these lofty heights, where normally aspirated engines would struggle. In the final stages of the year 1944, a revolutionary development in aerial combat began to unfold, fundamentally altering the established balance between Allied and German air forces. The strategic deployment of specially modified fighter planes enabled German pilots to establish high-altitude cover positions that American fighters, notably the formidable P-47 Thunderbolt, could no longer effectively exploit. This shift in tactics and technology marked a significant turning point, drastically changing the contours of the ongoing strategic bombing campaign across Europe and beyond. In particular, Oberste Johannes Steinhoff, who was commanding the prestigious Jagdgeschwader 77 in northern Italy, received initial reports from the pilots under his command about these new, transformed Thunderbolts. These reports emerged in March of the year 1944 during encounters with the American 12th Air Force, which had been steadily advancing and bombing targets across Italy. At first, Steinhoff was skeptical. He found it hard to believe that the P-47 Thunderbolt could match the climb performance of the well-known Messerschmitt Bf-109G-14, a fighter renowned for its agility and speed at high altitudes. However, his doubts were soon dispelled on March 15th, when he personally led a combat mission targeting American fighter-bomber formations near Bologna. During this engagement, Steinhoff found himself unexpectedly pursued by a P-47D-27, a variant of the Thunderbolt equipped with groundbreaking water injection technology. The American pilot activated this system, injecting water-methanol mixture into the engine's intake, which temporarily boosted the aircraft's power beyond its usual capabilities. With this boost, the Thunderbolt's climb rate became seemingly impossible for a plane of its size and weight. In the ensuing chase, Steinhoff was pushed to his limits, utilizing every ounce of his extensive combat experience and tactical ingenuity to evade the pursuing P-47. The American fighter, exploiting the water injection, entered a climb that had previously been considered unattainable by such a heavy aircraft. This encounter left Steinhoff profoundly impressed. He later reported to Luftwaffe headquarters that American engineers and pilots had, in a remarkably short period, managed to eliminate the Thunderbolt's primary weakness, its lack of high-altitude performance, virtually overnight. The use of water-methanol injection became a critical factor in these confrontations. The system allowed the P-47 to temporarily increase engine power, achieving a notable climb performance, but at a significant cost. The consumption rate of the mixture was approximately 6 gallons per hour at wartime emergency power settings. Most P-47 aircraft carried 15-gallon tanks of this mixture, which provided roughly 5 minutes of maximum boost, an interval that proved decisive in critical moments of combat. Pilots had to carefully manage their limited supply, making strategic decisions about when to activate water injection, saving it for imminent danger, such as when escaping a bounce or maintaining pursuit of an enemy climbing aircraft. This necessity for judicious use of water injection led to the development of new tactical doctrines among the German fighters. Instead of using water injection indiscriminately, pilots learned to conserve the mixture for decisive moments, employing it either to retreat swiftly from overwhelming odds or to keep up with high-climbing American fighters during pursuit. This tactical shift made the water injection system as much a psychological weapon as a technological one, as German pilots could never be certain which Thunderbolts still harbored a full 5-minute supply of maximum performance and which had already depleted their tanks. Meanwhile, the legendary Major Erich Hartmann, the highest-scoring fighter ace of the Luftwaffe with an astounding 352 confirmed victories, primarily flew on the Eastern Front during the earlier years of the war. However, in April of 1944, he was transferred briefly to JG-53 in Romania, where he encountered the latest models of American P-47 Thunderbolts from the 15th Air Force, which were escorting bomber formations attacking the oil facilities near Ploiești. Expecting these heavy American fighters to be easy prey compared to the agile Soviet Yak-9 or L-7 aircraft, Hartmann was nonetheless surprised to find that the Thunderbolts displayed climb performance that exceeded anything he had seen before. In one remarkable instance, a P-47D-28 pursued Hartmann's Messerschmitt, engaging in a series of vertiginous maneuvers that should have been impossible for such a heavy fighter. Hartmann narrowly escaped by leveraging superior tactical positioning and his extensive combat experience, which allowed him to outmaneuver the American fighter in the high-stakes environment of aerial dogfights. Reflecting later on this encounter, he remarked that the Americans had somehow transformed their flying tanks into rocket ships, an evolution that redefined the capabilities of their fighters and rendered previous assumptions about their limitations obsolete. Despite these technological and tactical advances, German aircraft production faced severe constraints owing to the relentless Allied bombing campaign targeting their key manufacturing facilities. The factories producing crucial aircraft components and engines, such as the mess relying heavily on tactical skill and extensive combat experience, pilots faced increasingly formidable opponents who now possessed not only numerical superiority, but also performance capabilities that challenged their own. Among these fighters was Lieutenant Colonel Mario Bellegami, commanding Italy's 5th Fighter Group, known as the ANR's 5th Group, which operated the Fiat G-55 Centauro aircraft. On April 25, 1944, Bellegami led a formation of these Italian fighters into combat against American bomber formations. This engagement turned out to be their final significant clash before Allied bombing raids effectively destroyed the Italian aircraft manufacturing facilities. During the battle, Bellegami's squadron encountered P-47 D-35 fighters from the United States Army Air Force's 325th Fighter Group, whose pilots responded swiftly by engaging their water injection systems immediately upon spotting the Italian aircraft. The American fighters quickly climbed to match the altitude of the Fiat G-55s, meter for meter, while unleashing devastating firepower from their 850 caliber machine guns. The intense exchange resulted in Bellegami losing 3 of his aircraft, including those of his wingmen, before he managed to escape the onslaught. Surviving Italian pilots later reported that the American fighters seemed to exhibit extraordinary agility and performance that their intelligence reports had not anticipated. They expressed astonishment at how the P-47s performed with such agility, often exceeding expectations during the engagement. Initially, the reliability of the water injection system, used to boost engine performance, had raised concerns among American crew chiefs. They worried that the added mechanical complexity could lead to failures during critical moments. However, engineers from Pratt & Whitney had meticulously designed the system with durability and simplicity in mind. Instead of employing intricate metering mechanisms, the system used straightforward pressure injection for the water-methanol mixture, which was stored in protected tanks with heated lines to prevent freezing at high altitudes. Activation of the water injection was made simple by pushing the throttle past a mechanical gate that engaged the system during the last eighth of throttle travel, a design that was virtually pilot-proof. This ensured the system would reliably operate when needed without risking accidental activation during normal flight operations. Meanwhile, in the Pacific Theater, Captain Satoshi Yamada of the Japanese Imperial Navy's 85th Sentai flew the K-84 Hei, which was regarded as Japan's most advanced fighter at the time. Confident in his aircraft's exceptional performance and maneuverability, Yamada engaged American P-47 fighters over Okinawa in April of 1945. Expecting his fighters' superior climb rate, dive speed, and robustness to give him an advantage, Yamada was surprised to find his opponent transformed into a more deadly adversary than anticipated. The American fighters demonstrated the ability to match his climb rate, surpass his dive speed, and withstand tremendous damage inflicted by his 20mm cannons, fighting back fiercely with their 850 caliber machine guns. Yamada watched in disbelief as a Thunderbolt he had damaged with cannon fire continued its relentless pursuit, climbing on water injection despite emitting black smoke from its engine, an indication of engine stress or damage. The American fighter maintained pursuit until Yamada's ammunition was exhausted, forcing him to retreat. This encounter had a profound psychological effect, especially on German morale, which had long celebrated a technical edge over Allied forces. Suddenly, their pilots found themselves confronting American fighters of superior performance in increasing numbers, challenging their previously dominant position. The psychological toll was exacerbated by the terrifying appearance of the Thunderbolts during water injection. When operating on this system, the engines trotted out thin streams of vapor resembling steam, giving the aircraft a spectral, almost supernatural presence. The familiar roar of radial engines morphed into a haunting howling, something veterans described as the sound of death drawing near. No longer just lumbering escorts for bombers, these massive American fighters had become predatory hunters capable of matching any Luftwaffe fighter in vertical performance and agility, instilling dread and awe among their adversaries. Despite the initial skepticism about the reliability of water injection, especially given its mechanical complexity, engineers like Pratt & Whitney had designed it to withstand the rigors of combat. The system's simplicity and robustness proved crucial during moments of high stress, such as in intense aerial battles, and played a significant role in the increasing effectiveness of American fighters in the final phases of the war. In the waning days of World War II, the commanding commando found himself now equipped with a revolutionary aircraft that had fundamentally altered aerial combat, the Me-262 jet fighter. Its presence was a game-changer on the battlefield, and it was observed operating with remarkable prowess over the airfield at Akmar in November of 1944. The sight of these aircraft in action was a stark reminder that even the most advanced German jets had to contend with the transformed and increasingly formidable American aircraft that now challenged them. These American fighters, notably the P-47D-30 model, had been extensively modified with cutting-edge technology, the most notable of which was their water injection systems. This innovation allowed the fighters to temporarily boost their engine power, enabling rapid acceleration and exceptional climb performance. Maneuvers that could easily outmatch a Me-262 pilot who committed the cardinal mistake of climbing away at too slow a speed. The American fighters could capitalize on this vulnerability, pushing their engines beyond standard limits for brief periods to gain an advantage during high-speed intercepts. On one such occasion, the commanding commando himself narrowly escaped an encounter with a P-47D-30 that had activated its water injection system and maintained a brief yet relentless pursuit of his aircraft. The German ace managed to escape only because the American pilot's water supply was exhausted after approximately 5 minutes, a limit built into the system to prevent engine damage. Before the American fighter could close within firing range, the pursuit was ultimately broken off, allowing the German pilot to live to fight another day. The strategic importance of these aircraft is underscored by the production statistics from the American industrial giants. Over 15,000 Thunderbolts, the popular name for the P-47, had been manufactured, more than any other American fighter of the war. Additional thousands were produced under license by manufacturers such as Curtiss-Wright and Ford, testifying to the massive industrial capacity of the United States that enabled rapid deployment of critical modifications across the entire fleet. These upgrades included the incorporation of water injection systems and paddle blade propellers, which collectively enhanced performance significantly. Meanwhile, the German aircraft industry grappled with mounting difficulties amid relentless Allied bombing campaigns, shortages of vital strategic materials, and the depletion of experienced workers who had been called to military service. As a result, the Luftwaffe was faced with a steadily increasing number of transformed Thunderbolts, American fighters that had been extensively modified to counter German aircraft, while their own resources and equipment grew increasingly inferior. An illustrative episode occurred near Milan on April 26, 1944, just a day after Mussolini's execution and 2 days prior to Germany's surrender in Italy. Major Giovanni Benet, commanding a unit of the 3rd Group of the Italian National Republican Air Force in Okaccia, engaged in combat with P-47D models. His unit was among the few Italian formations to receive the German-supplied Messerschmitt Bf-109 G-10 fighters, which they relied upon to defend Italian skies. During this engagement, Benet and his fellow pilots encountered Thunderbolts from the United States Army Air Force's 57th Fighter Group, whose pilots immediately engaged their water injection systems upon spotting the Messerschmitts. The American fighters demonstrated astounding climb performance, so impressive that Major Bennett found it hard to believe. Despite the excellent performance of his German-supplied Bf-109G-10, the American fighters proved nearly impossible to escape from, thanks in part to their superior maneuvering and power. The encounter was ultimately disrupted by the intervention of German anti-aircraft batteries, which forced the American pilots to break off their pursuit. The effects of water injection systems on engine wear and durability initially raised concerns among engineers. There was apprehension that repeatedly pushing engines to higher power levels might significantly reduce their operational lifespan. However, Pratt & Whitney, the manufacturers of the P-47 engines, discovered that the water-methanol mixture actually had a cooling effect. It reduced peak combustion temperatures, preventing the excessive heat that normally caused valve and piston damage at such high power settings. As a result, aircraft operating at around 2,800 horsepower with water injection experienced a surprisingly acceptable level of engine reliability, even during intense combat. The crews and maintenance crews were instructed to carefully monitor their engines after extensive use of water injection, vigilantly checking for signs of detonation damage or bearing wear. Regular inspections became part of routine protocol, ensuring that these powerful engines could be maintained and relied upon during critical operations. In early 1945, Colonel Yasuhiro, commanding the 71st Sentai equipped with Nakajima K-44 Shoki interceptors, took on the crucial task of defending Tokyo from B-29 Superfortress raids. These interceptors occasionally encountered P-47N models, which served as escort fighters, the ultimate Thunderbolt variant, providing cover for the heavy bombers. During these encounters, the formidable American fighters executed precise and aggressive tactics, utilizing their water injection systems to maximize performance and gain altitude rapidly. Throughout these intense aerial battles, the evolving technology during a daring sortie designed to extend their reach across the vast expanse of the Pacific, a new fighter variant was introduced, boasting an increased fuel capacity that allowed it to cover extraordinary distances. As these colossal American fighters soared overhead, their impressive performance surpassed even the most advanced interceptors the Axis powers had developed. They climbed effortlessly to altitudes where the German K-44 engine, despite its formidable power, began to falter under the immense pressure. The Americans had ingeniously combined turbocharging with water injection, which kept their engines running at peak performance, even under taxing conditions. This technological marvel enabled the aircraft to maintain full power at high altitudes, a feat previously thought impossible. From the German military command's perspective, the report conveyed urgent concern. The Americans had succeeded in producing a fighter that seemed to break through the traditional limitations of aircraft design. This aircraft could escort bombers across thousands of miles without losing effectiveness and engage in high-performance dogfights at virtually any altitude. The advent of innovations like water injection and paddle blade propellers marked a fundamental shift in the capabilities of air warfare. These advancements reflected a stark contrast in industrial and engineering philosophies. The Americans swiftly identified weaknesses within their opponent's aircraft, devised innovative solutions, and rapidly deployed these improvements across entire fleets within a few months. In contrast, the Axis powers faced severe challenges in keeping pace. Although their engineers possessed a theoretical understanding of the emerging technologies, their industrial resources were stretched thin, hindering widespread implementation. As a result, their pilots found themselves confronting opponents equipped with aircraft that suddenly seemed rendered obsolete almost overnight. This rapid shift in technical superiority signaled a crucial turning point, as the technological edge decisively shifted in favor of the Allies, just as the air war was approaching its intense climax. On the ground, Hauptmann Herbertfeld, commander of the 1st Squadron of the Jägerschwader 11, led one of the final large-scale campaigns of the Luftwaffe fighters against American bombers. On March the 18th of the year 1445, his squadron assembled every available Messerschmitt and Fallwolf aircraft for what was intended to be a maximum effort to intercept B-17 bombers targeting Berlin. These missions, however, encountered seasoned Fort 47D fighters from the 56th Fighter Group, Pilots who had been utilizing water injection systems for over a year to enhance their aircraft performance. Observing the mastery with which these Thunderbolts exploited their technological upgrades, Herbert Feld and his pilots watched helplessly as the Americans' aircraft, designed to be vulnerable during climbs, pursued relentlessly through every evasive maneuver. The water injection capabilities granted the American fighters the ability to sustain pursuit angles that would have been impossible only a year and a half earlier, making it nearly impossible for the German fighters to break free. In the course of the engagement, Herbert Feld lost 6 aircraft, yet not a single bomber was shot down. This encounter effectively marked the end of organized Luftwaffe resistance in the air, signifying a decisive turning point in aerial combat. Meanwhile, the Japanese Navy's experience with technological innovation paralleled these developments. Their elite 343rd Kokutai, equipped with the best fighters available, such as the Kawanishi N-1K2J Shidenkai, encountered American P-47Ns over the Japanese home islands in July of the year 1445. Lieutenant Commander Genda Minoru led a formation of 12 fighters, expecting to face sluggish American escort fighters. Instead, they found themselves confronted by Thunderbolts demonstrating performance levels that exceeded even the most optimistic intelligence estimates. These fighters climbed with authority, maintaining incredible speeds that the Japanese fighters couldn't match. The water injection systems allowed the American pilots to pursue their targets through maneuvers that should have left them stalled and vulnerable, effectively turning the tide of aerial engagement. Genda's pilots suffered the loss of 4 aircraft before he ordered a withdrawal, later lamenting that the Americans had somehow endowed their fighters with what appeared to be supernatural capabilities, an almost inexplicable performance that defied traditional logic. The narrative of these encounters culminated in the final months of the war, when German pilots flew the ultimate variants of their fighters, such as the Bf-109 K4 models equipped with the DB engine series. These aircraft represented the zenith of German engineering. Yet even these formidable fighters faced the relentless advances in Allied technology that had reshaped the aerial battlefield in ways previously thought impossible. The transformation of the P-47 Thunderbolt, a legendary American fighter aircraft, exemplified a groundbreaking era in military aviation, where innovative modifications fundamentally reshaped aerial combat. Originally designed as a robust, reliable fighter with a reputation for durability and firepower, the P-47 underwent a series of strategic technological enhancements that elevated its performance to unprecedented levels. These changes were not merely minor upgrades, they heralded a new approach to aircraft engineering, demonstrating that even relatively simple yet carefully engineered modifications could dramatically alter a plane's operational capabilities and, ultimately, its role in the war. One of the most remarkable advancements was the implementation of water-methanol injection systems, a technique sometimes called chemical intercooling. This method involved injecting a mixture of water and methanol into the aircraft's engines, which temporarily increased the density of the intake air, allowing the engines to produce significantly more power without extensive redesigns. The result was a substantial boost in horsepower, up to 2,000, a figure that in itself was a testament to the technological prowess of American engineers. This boost meant that the Thunderbolt could outperform many of its earlier adversaries, the German FW190D-9S, which were equipped with Jumo 213A engines, as well as the high-altitude TA-152H fighters. These German aircraft, which once seemed to hold certain advantages in speed and altitude, found themselves struggling against a Thunderbolt now capable of matching or surpassing their performance metrics. Another vital innovation was the use of paddle blade propellers, designed specifically to optimize thrust and efficiency at various speeds and altitudes. Unlike traditional propeller blades that often had to compromise between performance at low speeds and high speeds, the paddle blade design was tailored to meet specific flight demands. This customization reinforced the importance of matching engine and propeller configurations precisely to the aircraft's operational needs, rather than settling for generic solutions. Such meticulous attention to detail underscored a broader lesson learned during the war, that performance gains could be achieved through intelligent engineering choices, not just through more powerful engines alone. The combined effect of these enhancements, the water injection systems and the paddle blade propellers, transformed the P-47 Thunderbolt from a once ordinary fighter into a formidable aerial adversary with capabilities that demanded respect. The aircraft's newfound agility, climb rate, and dive speed meant that it could engage in combat on more equal terms with enemy fighters, shaking off notions of inferiority that German pilots had once held. The Thunderbolt's performance now rivaled the best fighters of the Axis powers and in some instances exceeded them. This transformation marked a turning point in the aerial dimension of the war, illustrating that American industrial capacity and innovative engineering could counter and even overturn the technical supremacy of Axis aircraft. The strategic implications of these improvements extended well beyond raw performance figures. They signaled a shift where quantity began to align with quality, as systematic and clever engineering allowed the Allies to leverage their numerical advantage more effectively. The skies, once dominated by Axis pilots confident in their technical edge, grew increasingly unfavorable to enemy fighters. German pilots, for example, soon realized that their previously comfortable advantage had evaporated, replaced by a relentless American assault powered by the scream of twin 1,800 horsepower engines and a cloud of water-methanol vapor. The impact on aerial combat was dramatic and immediate. P-47 pilots achieved staggering success, claiming over 7,000 aerial victories in Europe alone. Their remarkable kill ratio of around 4.6 to 1 underscored the effectiveness of these upgrades, which turned the Thunderbolt into a versatile, dominant force capable of engaging and overwhelming enemy fighters on equal terms or better. The modifications had transformed what was once considered a somewhat sluggish, ground attack-oriented aircraft into a true multi-role powerhouse, one that could climb swiftly, dive rapidly, and sustain intense combat without compromising its legendary durability. Adversaries, German, Italian, and Japanese pilots, initially dismissed the Thunderbolt as a lumbering, somewhat clumsy fighter, primarily suited for ground attack missions. Little did they realize that behind its rugged exterior lay a sleeping giant, awakened through American ingenuity and perseverance. They learned too late that the clever integration of water injection and custom propeller design had endowed the Thunderbolt with the climb performance, speed, and resilience needed to match, if not surpass, the most formidable enemy aircraft. This evolution gave rise to an aircraft that could effortlessly switch roles from bomber escort to dogfighter, thereby contributing decisively to Allied victories across Europe and the Pacific theater. In essence, the transformation of the P-47 Thunderbolt was more than just a technical achievement. It represented a pivotal turning point in the air war. It was a clear demonstration of how systematic innovation, combined with manufacturing excellence, could turn the tide against a seemingly superior opponent. The once sleeping giant of American air power had awakened fully, and with its newfound capabilities, it helped secure the ultimate victory. The changes were so profound and so irreversible that they not only altered the aircraft's performance, but also redefined the strategic landscape of aerial combat, an enduring testament to the power of